The precinct hummed with the ordinary noise of a Tuesday evening shift change. Phones rang at the front desk. A drunk driver argued about his rights near the holding bench. Officer Lena Maris moved between the counter and the file room, her boots quiet against the worn tile, half her attention on the intake forms and half on the low murmur of complaints stacking up around her. Corporal Eli Van came through the side corridor with Argo at heel, the German shepherd's nails clicking in a clean, practiced rhythm against the floor. They were headed toward the K9 staging room to log out for the night. Lena glanced up out of habit. She always watched Argo pass, the way you watch something powerful move without effort. Then Argo stopped. Not a slow stop. Not a distracted pause to sniff a dropped wrapper. He locked mid-stride, all 4 feet planted, his body suddenly a rigid line of muscle and attention. His ears pinned forward. His head turned, slow and deliberate, toward the waiting area benches near the front glass. Eli's hand tightened on the leash out of instinct. "Argo, heel!" The dog did not move. Argo, firmer this time. Nothing. Not defiance exactly. Lena had seen defiance before, and this wasn't that. This was focus so complete it looked like the dog had forgotten the command existed. Eli's brow furrowed. He glanced at Lena, and she saw something shift behind his eyes, the calm recalibration of a handler realizing his partner was telling him something urgent. "That's not normal," Eli said quietly. "He doesn't blow off a heel. Not once in 5 years." Lena followed the dog's line of sight and found her. A girl sat alone on the far bench, folded into herself like she was trying to disappear into the vinyl cushion. Small for her age, maybe 9, wearing a faded yellow raincoat 2 sizes too big and clutching a unicorn backpack with one strap hanging loose. Her hair was damp at the ends. Her sneakers were untied. Nobody was sitting near her. Nobody had noticed her at all. Ms. Corinne Vale, the volunteer who usually handled water and blankets for waiting families, looked over from her cart and frowned. "I thought she was with the Petrovsky woman," she murmured, more to herself than anyone. "I didn't realize. She's been sitting there a while." Sergeant Miro Salcedo came around the corner from his desk, drawn by the stillness rippling through the room. "What's going on?" "Van, control your dog." "I am controlling him," Eli said, and there was an edge under the calm now. "He's controlling himself. Sarge, look at him. That's a hard alert." Salcedo's jaw tightened. "We've got a full lobby and a K9 fixated on a kid. Let's not make this a scene. Probably belongs to somebody in intake." "She's been sitting there 15 minutes without an adult," Lena said, stepping around the counter before she'd fully decided to. Her pulse had picked up without permission. Something in her chest recognized the posture of that girl before her mind caught up. The folded arms, the stillness, the eyes fixed on the floor like eye contact might cost something. Eli loosened Argo's lead by 2 feet, watching the dog's body language the way he'd read it 1,000 times before. Argo didn't lunge. He didn't bark. He moved forward in slow, deliberate steps, low and careful, the kind of approach Eli used for scent confirmation on something fragile. Or someone frightened. "Let him go," Eli said softly, to Salcedo more than to Lena. "He's not hunting. He's checking." Argo crossed the last few feet and stopped in front of the girl, close enough that his nose nearly touched the hem of her raincoat. He didn't jump. He didn't paw. He lowered his head and sniffed once, twice, along the sleeve, then shifted toward the unicorn backpack resting against her leg, nostrils working in short, precise pulls. The girl didn't scream. She didn't pull away. She went completely still. Not calm still. Not the stillness of a child comfortable around dogs. It was a different kind of stillness, one Lena recognized instantly and painfully. The kind she'd learned herself a long time ago in houses that weren't safe. A stillness built out of practice, out of survival, out of learning that movement sometimes made things worse. "Hey," Lena said gently, crouching a few feet away, keeping her voice low and even. "You're okay. He's a good dog. He's not going to hurt you." The girl's eyes lifted, just slightly, toward Argo's calm brown gaze. Her lips parted. For a moment, nothing came out at all, and the whole corner of the waiting room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for whatever she might say. Then, barely above a whisper, she asked, "If I hold still, will he stop being mad?" The words landed like a dropped weight. Salcedo's hand froze halfway to adjusting his radio. Priya Bellon, who had just come out from records with a stack of forms, stopped in the doorway, forms forgotten against her chest. Eli's jaw tightened, and for a moment the veteran handler looked like he'd been struck. Lena felt something crack open in her own chest. Old and familiar, a memory of small rooms and careful footsteps and learning that quiet was survival. She kept her voice steady only through effort. "Nobody here is mad at you," she said softly. "Nobody. You can move. You're safe." The girl blinked, as if the sentence didn't quite fit into any framework she understood. Argo remained beside her, solid and unmoving, his shoulder almost touching her knee, offering his weight the way handlers sometimes describe dogs offering comfort without being told to. Eli didn't call him off. He watched, and Lena saw him make a silent decision that this was no longer routine. Salcedo's irritation had drained out of his face entirely, replaced by something graver. "Get her somewhere private," he said quietly. "Now. And somebody find out what she's got in that bag." Lena reached out, slow and open-palmed, the way you'd approach something wounded. "What's your name, sweetheart?" The girl's eyes flicked once more to Argo, as if checking with him first. Then, so quiet it nearly disappeared under the hum of the precinct, she answered. "Ren." The interview room was smaller than the waiting area, but it felt safer. Walls close and quiet, one table, 3 chairs, and a window that looked out on nothing but the parking lot lights. Lena sat across from Ren, with her hands folded loosely on the table, careful not to make any sudden movement. Priya stood near the door with a notepad she hadn't opened yet. Argo lay near Ren's feet, not touching her, just present, his body a low, warm line of stillness that seemed to anchor the girl more than anything Lena said. "You don't have to talk if you don't want to," Lena said gently. "But if you can tell me anything, it might help your mom." Ren's fingers tightened on the strap of the unicorn backpack in her lap. At the mention of her mother, something moved behind her eyes, fear and hope tangled together so tightly it was hard to tell them apart. "She told me to be quiet," Ren whispered. "She said if I was quiet, he wouldn't get worse." "Who's he?" Lena asked, keeping her voice soft, even though her pulse had climbed. "My dad." The words came out small and flat, like she'd practiced saying them without feeling. "He said we were going somewhere else. After dark." Priya's pen finally moved, scratching quickly against the notepad. Lena kept her eyes on Ren, not wanting to break whatever fragile thread had opened. "Where's your mom now, sweetheart?" Ren's chin trembled. She looked down at Argo instead of Lena, as if it were easier to speak to the dog. "Behind the red door," she said. "There's boxes. Lots of boxes." She said, "Don't touch nothing." But I put her paper in my bag. I didn't mean to keep it. I didn't know what else to do with it. Lena's chest tightened. "Can I see your bag, Ren?" "You don't have to give it to me. I'll just look, okay?" The girl nodded, small and quick, and slid the backpack across the table like it weighed more than she could carry any farther. Lena unzipped it slowly. Inside was a half-eaten granola bar, a small stuffed rabbit missing one ear, and a folded piece of paper crushed into a tight square. Lena unfolded it with careful fingers. It was a child's drawing, crayon strokes gone soft with handling. A red door, a small blue star drawn beside the frame, and stacks of rectangular shapes behind it that could only be boxes. Below the drawing, in a different hand, someone had scrawled numbers and letters that didn't belong to a child's world at all. She turned it over and found a second sheet folded beneath it. A printed page, creased and soft at the corners like it had been handled and rehandled. Payroll ledger lines. Vendor names. Initials that didn't match any business Lena recognized. And near the bottom, underlined twice in pen, the notation B14. Argo lifted his head. He hadn't moved in minutes, but now his nose worked the air near the table, drawn toward the paper in Lena's hand. He rose, careful and deliberate, and pressed his nose to the edge of the ledger page, inhaling in short, precise pulls, the way he had at the backpack in the waiting room. Then he sat, without command, his focus fixed and unbroken on the paper itself. "He's keying on that page." Quote, Eli said from the doorway, arms crossed, watching his partner with the quiet intensity of a man reading something only he fully understood. Chemical trace, maybe. Something industrial. That's not just paper he's smelling. Lena felt something small and brass slide loose from the folded ledger page and land softly on the table. A half of a key, brass and worn, on a ring bent into the shape of a little crescent moon. "What's this from, Ren?" Ren's eyes filled but didn't spill. "Mom has the other half," she said. "She said if we ever got split up, I should keep my half safe." Lena set the key down gently, her mind already assembling pieces faster than she wanted it to. A red door. Boxes. A ledger page with false vendor names. A location marked B14. A missing mother. A father who told his daughter to stay quiet, or things would get worse. "Ren," she said carefully, "do you know your mom's name? Her full name?" "Nadia," Ren said. "Nadia Calder. And my dad's Troy." She said his name like it cost her something to speak it, like the syllables themselves carried weight. Priya was already moving, phone against her ear, voice low and urgent as she relayed the name to dispatch. Lena watched her step into the hallway, catching fragments. No check-in at the warehouse office, plate pinged near an apartment complex 2 hours ago, no answer on a cell number. Salcedo appeared in the doorway a moment later, his face harder than it had been in the lobby. "Dispatch says Nadia Calder didn't show for her evening bookkeeping shift." "No call, no message. That's not like her," according to her supervisor. He looked at Lena, then at the drawing and ledger page laid out on the table, then at Argo, still sitting rigid beside the papers like a sentinel refusing to be dismissed. "This isn't a custody thing anymore, is it?" "I don't think it ever was," Lena said quietly. Eli crouched down near Argo, running a steadying hand along his shoulder, though the dog didn't need calming so much as acknowledgement. "He's not going to let this go," Eli said. "Whatever's on that page, whatever's on that key, he's telling us it matters." Salcedo exhaled hard through his nose, looking suddenly older than he had 10 minutes earlier. "Then we don't sit on it," he said. "Van, get Argo staged for a possible search. Maris, stay with the girl. Bellin, keep pulling everything on Troy Calder. Vehicle, address, priors, anything." Ren looked up at Lena with the same searching, careful expression she'd worn since the waiting room, as though bracing to be told she'd done something wrong. "You didn't do anything wrong," Lena said, answering the question before it was asked. "You did something very brave." Somewhere down the hall, a phone began to ring with the particular urgency of bad news arriving fast, and Argo's ears turned toward it, already listening for what came next. The address on the storage rental came back inside 11 minutes, pulled from a shell business name buried 2 layers under Troy Calder's actual signature. Halvek had joined by then, his coat still damp from the rain outside, phone pressed to his ear as he confirmed the paperwork with a night clerk who sounded half asleep. Lena stood near the vehicle bay with Eli and Argo, watching the dog pace in tight, restless circles at the end of his line. "Cold Creek Self-Storage," Halvek said, lowering the phone. "Unit 42. Rentals under a name that traces back through 2 invoices to Calder Plumbing Supply. Whoever set this up wanted distance between Troy's name and the property." "That fits," Priya said, jogging up with a printout in hand. Vendor initials on the ledger match partial names on file with the county. Somebody's been paying ghosts for 2 years. Salcedo's voice crackled through the radio, clipped to Lena's shoulder. Move on the storage unit. Halvek, your lead. Van, bring the dog. If there's any indication of the mother inside, I want it called in immediate. The drive-out felt longer than it was. Streetlights smearing past the windshield in long yellow streaks, rain ticking against the glass in a rhythm that matched the tightness in Lena's chest. Wren stayed back at the precinct with Ms. Vale, wrapped in a blanket and given hot chocolate she hadn't touched, her eyes following Lena all the way to the door before it closed. Cold Creek Self-Storage sat behind a chain-link fence, rows of corrugated metal doors under sodium lights that buzzed faintly in the wet air. Unit 42 was near the end, padlocked, unremarkable except for a fresh scrape along the door track where something had been dragged recently. Eli brought Argo forward on the long line once the lock was cut, and the dog's body language shifted the moment the door rolled up. Ears forward. Tail low and still. He moved into the unit with the same deliberate care he'd shown in the waiting room. Nose skimming boxes, a rusted toolbox, a stack of manila folders zip-tied together. Inside, flashlight beams caught what nobody wanted to see and everybody had feared. Bundles of cash in plain envelopes. Rolls of duct tape, one torn open and half used. Folders full of invoices stamped with vendor names that didn't exist, dates that didn't align, numbers that had clearly been massaged for months. It was enough evidence to bury a man's career and freedom both. But no Nadia. "She's not here," Halvek said, voice tight, already turning in a slow circle as if the woman might materialize from a shadow he'd missed. "This is a stash site. Cash, paperwork. He was keeping his tracks buried here, not her." Lena felt something cold slide through her stomach. "Then where?" Eli crouched beside Argo, watching him carefully. The dog wasn't showing the focused, locked-in behavior of a live human scent trail. He sniffed the boxes, the tape, the folders, but his interest stayed shallow, scattered, nothing like the rigid certainty he'd shown at the backpack or the ledger page back at the precinct. "He's not finding her," Eli said quietly. "If she'd been kept here recently, even briefly, he'd be locked on something. He's not." "So we wasted 20 minutes, Priya said, frustration cracking through her usual calm. "No." Lena knelt down near the ledger folder Halvek had bagged, pulling the plastic evidence sleeve close enough for Argo to approach again. The dog's reaction was immediate and different. A hard, focused inhale, nose pressed near the seam of the sleeve where the original ledger page's twin copy sat folded inside. He sat, rigid, staring at it the way he had back in the interview room. He's not confused. He's telling us this place matters, but it isn't the place. Halvek frowned, crouching to look at the notation again, the underlined B14 pressed dark into the paper. "Bay 14, he murmured, almost to himself. "That's not a storage unit code. Storage units here run double digits with a letter prefix, not B in number." He straightened fast, pulling his own phone, thumb moving quick across the screen. "Calder Plumbing Supply runs an overflow warehouse out at Mercer Industrial Park. I pulled the property records earlier for background. Loading bays out there are labeled with letters and numbers." His eyes came up, sharp now, urgent. "Bay 14. The words landed in the cold, wet air like a switch thrown. "He's had 2 locations this whole time," Lena said, voice low, working it through even as she said it. "One to hide the money and the fraud paperwork. One to hide her." Eli was already coiling Argo's long line, his jaw set, professional calm returning fast now that there was a direction again. "Then we're not done here. We're just done wasting time." Salcedo's voice cut through the radio again, terser now, worry threading under the command. "Patrol units are trying to raise Troy Calder's truck on traffic cams. Last plate hit was 20 minutes ago, moving south, consistent with a route toward the industrial park. If he's heading there now—" "He's not hiding her anymore," Halvek said grimly. "He's moving her," Wren said after dark. "It's dark," Lena's pulse spiked hard, the cold rain suddenly sharper against her skin as urgency crowded out everything else. Then we need to be there before he decides after dark means tonight, right now. Eli didn't wait for further discussion. He whistled low, and Argo rose instantly from his sit, alert, primed, line taut, but calm in his handler's grip. The dog's eyes found Lena for half a second, steady and certain, as if he understood the shift in the air just as clearly as the humans around him. Mercer Industrial Park, Halvek said into his radio, already moving toward the vehicles. Bay 14. All units, converge, quiet approach, if possible. We may have an active abduction victim on site and a suspect potentially inbound. Lena climbed into the passenger seat of Eli's unit, hands trembling faintly with the kind of fear that came only when stakes turned sharp and immediate. Through the rain-streaked window she could see Argo settling into the back, ears still pricked, body still leaning faintly toward the road ahead, as though some part of him had already started running toward Bay 14 before the engine even turned over. Mercer Industrial Park sat low behind a chain-link perimeter, warehouse rows stretched out under sparse security lights, half of them flickering, the rain giving everything a slick, restless shine. Eli killed the headlights 200 yards out, easing the unit along the access road with only parking lights guiding them past stacked pallets and dark loading docks. Lena's eyes moved fast across the numbers stenciled above each bay door. 6, 10, 12, counting down toward the one that mattered. Bay 14 sat near the end of the row, its metal door pulled down but not fully seated, a thin black gap along the bottom edge. Beside it, faint under the security light, a small blue star decal clung to the frame, half peeled, exactly like the one crayoned into Wren's drawing. Lena's breath caught. "That's it," she whispered. "That's her drawing." Halvek's unit rolled in behind them, two more following at a careful distance, engines cut before they reached full stop. Officers spread low along the fence line, radios muted to a whisper of static. Eli released Argo from the vehicle, hooking him into working harness with quick, practiced motions, his voice barely above breath. "Search," he murmured. "Find." Argo moved forward in a low, purposeful glide, nose dropping to the wet concrete, then rising toward the gap beneath the door. His body coiled tighter with every step, ears locked, tail dead still. The posture of a dog who had found the center of something and meant to stay there. Then, from inside, a muffled thud. A woman's voice, choked and low, cut off fast like a hand had come down over a mouth. Lena's pulse slammed hard against her ribs. "She's in there." Halvek raised a fist, freezing the line. He motioned two officers toward the smaller side door, 20 feet down the wall, out of sight from the main bay entrance. Eli held Argo steady, the dog's body trembling faintly with restrained intent, waiting for release like a drawn bowstring. The scrape of metal came from inside, a chain being pulled, a door hinge crying out. Through the gap, headlights swept briefly against the far wall, an engine coughing to life, somewhere deeper in the warehouse. "He's moving her," Lena said, sharp and low. "Now." Halvek didn't hesitate. "Go." The side door gave way under a single hard strike, and the team flowed in fast and low, flashlights slicing through dust and shadow. Stacked boxes lined the walls in uneven towers, exactly as Wren had drawn them, and past them a red metal door stood half open, throwing a long bar of interior light across the concrete floor. Troy Calder spun toward them from beside a service exit. A woman's arm gripped hard in his free hand, her wrists bound in front of her with the same silver tape found back at the storage unit. Nadia Calder stumbled forward under his grip, pale, exhausted, a dark bruise blooming along her jaw, but alive. Unmistakably, achingly alive. "Don't," Troy said, voice cracking between fury and panic. "She's coming with me. This isn't what it looks like." "Let her go," Halvek said, weapon low but ready, voice even despite the adrenaline roughening it. "It's over, Troy. We know about the ledger. We know about Bay 14. Something in Troy's face collapsed for half a second. Recognition, maybe, that the careful architecture of lies had finally given way. Then he shoved Nadia hard toward a stack of boxes and bolted for the loading exit at the far end of the bay, boots slapping against wet concrete. "Argo, Varan!" Eli's command cracked through the warehouse, and the leash went slack as the dog surged forward, a blur of dark motion closing the gap in seconds. Troy made it 3 strides past the threshold before Argo's jaws closed firm around his forearm, weight and momentum dragging him sideways into a stack of empty pallets with a crash that echoed off the metal walls. Troy screamed more from shock than pain, thrashing once, twice, before 2 officers reached him and pinned him flat, cuffs closing hard around wrists that had spent the evening binding someone else's. Argo released on command the instant Eli's voice cut through, stepping back with controlled precision, chest heaving, eyes locked on the man now pressed face down against the concrete. Lena was already at Nadia's side, cutting through the tape at her wrists with careful, steady hands, murmuring the kind of reassurance she'd learned to give in rooms just like this one, a lifetime ago, on the other side of the fear. "You're safe," Lena said. "Your daughter's safe. She's the one who brought us here." Nadia's whole body folded at that, a sob breaking loose from somewhere she'd clearly been holding it shut for hours. "Ren," she whispered. "She got out. She actually got out." "She did," Lena said, throat tightening. "She walked into a police station and didn't say a single word wrong." Back at the precinct, past midnight, the waiting room had gone quiet again, though nothing about it felt the same as it had hours earlier. Ren sat wrapped in a blanket on the same bench where Argo had first frozen, her mother beside her now, arm looped protectively around her shoulders, both of them still catching up to the fact that the danger had actually ended. Salcedo stood near the front desk, arms crossed, watching the 2 of them with an expression far removed from the brisk efficiency he'd shown at shift start. "From now on," he said quietly to Lena, "any unaccompanied kid sitting in this lobby gets pulled for a private welfare check inside 10 minutes. No exceptions. And if one of the dogs so much as blinks wrong at somebody, I want ears up immediately, not after." "Understood," Lena said, and meant it more than she'd meant almost anything all night. Eli brought Argo over last. Off duty now, harness loosened, the dog moving with the loose, easy gait of a job finished well. He settled at a respectful distance from Ren, not pushing, simply present, the way he'd been from the very first moment he refused to heel. Ren looked at him for a long moment, then slid off the bench, blanket trailing, and crossed the space between them on her own. She knelt slowly, reached into her small fist, and pulled free the half-brass key on its little crescent moon ring. Carefully, with fingers that no longer shook, she clipped it onto a loop of Argo's harness. "You found her," she whispered. "You knew before anybody." Argo's tail moved once, slow and steady, and he leaned his head gently against her shoulder, patient and solid, asking for nothing in return. Nadia watched from the bench, tears slipping freely now, one hand pressed against her mouth. Lena stood near the doorway, arms crossed loosely, throat tight, watching a small girl who had once believed stillness was the only way to survive, finally choose, on her own, to reach out and be brave.